Hello everyone, I'm back from my little hiatus or whatnot. Um, Mostly I haven't done a video in a while just because I didn't have any material to really do it on. But while working, I was talking with one of my coworkers, Dillon, not Christian, and he was bringing up some things that bothered him about Christianity. One was the whole thing about Constantine, which we're going to discuss in the next video. And the other thing is going to be on the Leviticus laws. Now, everyone's familiar with all the good old Leviticus laws. It seems that everyone who has a problem with the Bible always points to that and points to all the weird things in there. And there's actually, now that I did some research, there's some pretty good reasoning behind what it is. And that's what I want to explain to you right now what the Leviticus laws were for, why they were there, and kind of explaining the environment that they're in. Now, the book of Leviticus starts after Exodus, and just after Moses leads his people out of Egypt, and where they, after God saved them, opened up the Red Sea, all this stuff, they built a golden calf and started worshiping that instead of God. And now they're heading into the desert as part of their punishment for being told noobs, pretty much. um, so the Levites were the priests, and to help the people, instruct the people in how to follow God and live their life for God by being holy. Now, if you ever look through some of them, the Book of Leviticus is pretty spread out. There's a lot of content in there. Um, but one thing that the main theme of this book is to separate the Israelites from the other people. Not in terms of like they're better than them or anything, but to be holy is to be set apart, and that's what this is all about. Is to try to be, it can be perfect, but try to be holy and try to be like God in that aspect and to follow Him. So, firstly, it goes through the beginning, and a lot of this is also helpful hints given to them. Which will be explained. There's talking about the various offerings to show penance to the Lord, guilt offerings, sin offerings, grain offerings. Um, One thing that goes in for chapter 7 is talking about how eating blood is forbidden. Now, there's a couple of reasons for this, and a lot of this is going to be a mix of both common sense and health things, as well as spiritual double meanings, which explains. So, it goes in chapter 7 in 22, starts talking about how blood is forbidden. And it explains in there that there's the main reason, the spiritual reason for why blood is forbidden is because in the process of sacrificing an animal, innocent blood is paid for your sin. So that animal, as I said, the blood is their life force, and they are giving it as a sin payment for your sin. So your punishment is passed on to them. So to drink the blood of an animal is to, in essence, instead of giving that life which belongs to God and is being taken as a punishment, you're taking your own payment type of thing. So it's a little bit arrogant. Plus, though, eating and drinking blood, there's going to be parasites, which isn't going to be healthy. Israelites put a very high emphasis on life, and they often lived a lot longer than the rest of the people around them. One resource said even up to 3 times as long as normal people. Um, so, let's see, I got that one. Priest mystery. Do do do. It talks about clean and unclean, purification after birth. Okay, there's a lot in here that's going to be talking about how people becoming unclean. Now, a lot of people think that when they say unclean, they mean that they're sinful, that they've committed a sin, that they're unholy, or something like that. That really isn't the case. Unclean in here can mean a couple things. First off, it can mean actually unclean, as in like physically dirty. In most cases, it's not that case. But also unclean is in not ready to go again into worship. So you must be thinking, what the heck, after a woman, has a baby, in verse 12 was talking about has a baby, they are unclean for so many days or so many weeks or something like that. The reason why is because around them there are some other cultures and some other religious practices, and a lot of them had a lot to do with sexuality. They put sex in with their worship, from things from childbirth to the menstruation period to orgies to sex with animals. All this different stuff was part of the religious practices of some of the people. I think the Canaanites were the one that they were talking about, as well as some other things which is mentioned in there. So what God was doing is He was setting that apart. Now God made sex, He made it. It's a good thing when the boundaries of marriage, but He did not want that part of worship. He wanted to make sure it was separate It has nothing to do with worship. He did not want his people to be mixing the practices of the other cultures in with there. And that's also why later in the Bible, um, going in there, they said, do not spare the people of the adults of the tribes. Kill them, otherwise you will start to assimilate their things, including child sacrifices, which God doesn't like. He's not a big advocate of killing children. In fact, he pretty frowns upon it. Anyways, but I digress. Okay, so the unclean states for things like when you menstruate or when a guy ejaculates, stuff like that, is then you are not supposed to participate in the tabernacle church practices for a little bit. Take a break. Make sure it's separate. So he's putting a big emphasis on that. Not that having a kid is a sin or having your menstruation is a sin. It's not a sin. It's part of biological. It's how God made us. So that was a lot of reason why the rules were there. So continuing on, it also talks about regulations about infectious skin disease, mildew, and how to cleanse it. So there's a lot about how to keep healthy, things to watch out for. And then it goes into a bunch of weird ones. And now they seem weird, but actually there's a good explanation for them. First up, it goes through the unlawful sexual relationships. That's, again, just that God made sex for a reason. Not to have with your family members, not to have with animals, not to have people of the same gender. All these things just because, one, God made it that way. Plus, like I said, the other cultures were practicing these things where they're having incest, they're having sex with animals, they're having all this stuff. And God did not want his people to be a part of that. Okay, and then it goes through some other ones, and there's actually some pretty cool ones in here. For instance, and people always point at like the doom and gloom ones, but there's other ones in here. For instance, like in chapter 19, of course, the do not lie, do not steal, do not bear false witness, do not defraud your neighbor, do not curse the deaf or put a stumbling block in front of the blind. Treat them with respect, treat your elders with respect. Do not pervert the justice. Do not seek revenge or bear grudges against people, but love your neighbor as yourself. And things like that. Now, there's a couple of weird ones which I thought would be kind of fun to mention. There's one in verse 19 that says, do not mate different kinds of animals. I'm not sure if they are mating donkeys and horses or whatnot, but I think, if I'm right, a mule is a donkey and a horse mix, but sterile, so it's kind of, it doesn't really work out too well. Plus, a lot of animals do not breed together, so he's probably saying don't waste your time with it. Plus, it's just kind of weird. Do not plant your fields with two kinds of seeds. Now, this could also be both a spiritual and a physical meaning. I'm not sure. I'm not a farmer, but I'd imagine that if you plant two types of seeds that might conflict or might both try to take too much of the nutrients, they both would suffer, possibly. Not positive, but there might have been a time, I'm not sure what plants to use. As well as those saying, in your life, do not take on two different types of masters. Do not take two types of religion. You are gods, do not mix. Do not wear clothes woven with two types of materials. Again, the spiritual meaning, but also if you take two different types of materials and sew them together, one's going to shrink more than the other, and it's going to tear. A lot of people who do seamstress and stuff like that know that, so it's kind of cool why that's there. Now, verse 20, now I'm probably going to do a two-parter on this because there's a lot of explaining. Verse 20, there's a lot of controversy over it. It says, if a man sleeps with a woman who is a slave girl promised to another man, but who has not been ransomed or given her freedom, there must be due punishment. Yet they are not to be put to death because she has not been freed. The man, however, must bring a ram to the entrance of the tent of the meeting for a guilt offering. And goes on with the guilt offering, the priest will make atonement for him, and the Lord, and the sins will be committed, and the sins will be forgiven. Now, other sexual crimes were punishable by death. The reason is because, like I said, they put a very big emphasis on being alive. So you can imagine if, the punishment is death, how many people are actually going to take the risk to have sex outside of marriage when you could just get married instead? One sec. I'm busy! Yeah, sorry about that. My parents came home. Anyways, so I'm going to go to part 2. So stop by part 2. I'm going to explain this one. I hate to leave it on a point like this, but visit part 2. Okay, watch it. I'll be right back.